glad y'all tuned in. We about to get this show started. Yeah. Dr. Clyde Winters and Yoshi. Yeah. Then and now. We talking about back in the day and right now. Yeah.
Now let's introduce Yoshima the Genius and Dr. Clyde Winters, the godfather of research.
What up, though? What up, though? What up, though? I know it's kind of late, but I wanted to talk to you guys tonight about the civil rights movement and the fight for voting rights today. You know, the civil rights movement, I'll admit, I didn't really see too much in it when I was growing up because I felt that I didn't even think that black people should go around letting people just beat their ass and not really stand up for something. But there's a lot of interesting things that took place during the civil rights movement and that reflect on what we're doing today, because this is an important time to talk about because we got another election coming up. And this election, you know, FBA people are under a lot of pressure, a whole lot of pressure. And much of this pressure is coming from people who say that, hey, we have a black woman running and that black people should vote for her. But sadly, I'll admit that Kamala Harris, she's an Indian, and she is black, but she's not a foundational black American. No, she's not a foundational black American. As a result, you know, we're not going to be bamboozled like we did last time, and we supported a Kenyan, you know, Obama, when Obama was president, but he was a tether in the sense that he wasn't foundational black American, and when he got in office, he didn't do nothing for us. No, he did nothing for foundational black Americans. Therefore, we're not going to be played again and be led down the garden path, you know, with some idea in a sense that we're going to get our rights through somebody who's claiming to be a foundational black American who's not a foundational black American, who's claiming to be someone who wants to see us get a lot out of life. And in reality, she doesn't really care what we get. She doesn't really care about who we are, you know, because see, she is in a sense a tether. And tethers, that's a word that we use to refer to black people in a sense who are cosplaying. Yeah, cosplaying that they're foundational black Americans, but they're not foundational black Americans. No. They're not foundational black Americans. What they are is they're just cosplaying. But today, in a sense, I still think that we do have some things that are important, some things that relate to now that took place back in the day. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So let's talk about the civil rights movement and where we are. When you look at the civil rights movement and voting rights, you know, this picture kind of, in a sense, I love this picture because it's a picture, it kind of lets you see kind of what was going on back in the day. It's a lot of protests. You know, it was people, in a sense, that were standing up for their rights. The civil rights movement was a pivotal struggle for racial equality in the United States during the 1950s and 60s. What people did during that time was they wanted to focus on dismantling the racial segregation and get secure securing rights for African Americans. It's very important to understand that it wasn't that foundational black Americans couldn't vote, because we've always fought, and if we fought hard enough, we did vote. But we do know that because of the fact that in many parts of the United States where black people were the majority, you know, Caucasians did many things in a sense to keep black people from voting. And these things were done so that black people, foundational black Americans, would not be able to get power. You know, one of the biggest One of the biggest barriers to voting was Jim Crow. During the Jim Crow era, they had poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses were used to prevent Black Americans from voting. A poll tax, they might say that you might have to pay $100 to vote. And come on now, a lot of poor people didn't have that money. Or they may say you had to read and write. Black people couldn't read and write. And then sometimes they would have a grandfather clause. And this grandfather clause, what it was in a sense was, it was a clause that they said that if your grandfather didn't vote, then you couldn't vote. But all of these things basically were Jim Crow laws. And these Jim Crow laws were institutionalized ways to maintain racial discrimination in the South, and Black people fought against those things. One of the earliest fights against segregation was the Brown versus Board of Education. Brown versus Board of Education is a very important case. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education that school segregation was unconstitutional. Yes. You see, this landmark decision inspired further civil rights activism, and it encouraged many Black people to seek, in a sense, more opportunities. But see, this case, Board versus Board of Education, yes, it desegregated school, but see, most of the time when Europeans give Black people something, they always have a trick to it. They always had a trick to it. So what they did, they desegregated the schools. And what they said was, but when Black people wanted the schools to segregate, they didn't just want to have the schools desegregate so we could go to school with white folks. They wanted the schools desegregated so that we would have the monies. Yes, the monies to make our own schools. Black people had already developed many schools in many southern districts, schools where Black kids were learning, where Black people, in a sense, were progressing, where Black children was growing up with a lot of self-esteem about themselves. So then they didn't really, in a sense, want to just have the schools desegregated. They wanted, in a sense, to have more money made available for Black schools to be able to prosper and multiply. Then we find, in a sense, that by 1955 and 1956, there was a lot of different things, in the sense, that were going on to kind of get Black people to demand more civil rights. Much of it was sparked by the Rosa Parks when she refused to give up her seat to a white man. This is a very complicated thing because, see, Rosa Parks was not, in a sense, the first person that they wanted to use, because the first person they wanted to use was a Black girl. But the problem was that she got pregnant, and they felt, in a sense, that since she was an unwed mother, she might not be a good representative for the bus boycott. So they had Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks' Montgomery bus boycott between 1955 and 1956 was a year-long boycott led to the desegregation of public buses. Yes. This highlighted, in a sense, the power of nonviolent protest. Yes, this showed Black people that if you demand something and you decide you're not going to give in, because, see, they didn't just give in because of the fact that Black people said that they weren't going to these schools. That meant money. They lost money. It's about money. Whenever, in a sense, Black people demand something and they want to make sure that they are given their rights based upon a demand for money, Europeans understand that they had to give a change. One of the most important people for the civil rights movement, of course, was the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. MLK advocated for nonviolent resistance to achieve civil rights. He led marches, sit-ins at restaurants, and gave influential speeches, in which he, in a sense, promoted and encouraged Black people to fight for civil rights. This is a momentous occasion because, see, the most powerful word in the English language, never forget this. Never forget this, FBA. It is the most powerful word in the English language is the word no. See, when you decide you're not going to do something, that is a very dangerous consequence. Because when you decide you're not going to do anything because you say no, that means that people have no power over you. And this was something, in a sense, that made progress. You see, one of the things in the 1960s was the sit-in movement. Black students began to sit in at segregated lunch counters, sparking nationwide protests. This to the segregation of many public facilities. You know, back in the day, places like Walgreens and other places had in a sense lunch counters inside of their properties. And what happened in the city, you could go on these properties and you could go in and you could possibly buy a soda, or even maybe buy a little food. And so then they did not want these places, although Black people may be able to go into these establishments and maybe buy medical supplies or buy some other type of commodity, they weren't allowed to stay in those places. These were places where only white people were supposed to be able to sit, but Black people began to go into these places. They began, in a sense, to sit down at these establishments, and they demanded their rights. So we find, in a sense, that this sit-in movement was very important in terms, in a sense, of challenging their Jim Crow laws that demanded Black people couldn't do anything. By 1961, they moved into freedom rides. And these freedom rides are when activist Black people would integrate buses in the segregated South and challenge non-enforcement of the segregation laws. Yes, they met violent resistance, but they raised national awareness, you see. I have to explain to you what it was. During the 50s and 60s, there was a conflict between the United States and Russia. They did not want communism to take over in the United States because they didn't want communism to become a major way of doing things in the United States. What happened, in a sense, is that they began, in a sense, to say, we have to give these Black people something. They did not like, people around the world being able, in a sense, to see Black people being beaten, Black people being dogs, being sick on them, just for them demanding their civil rights. And as a result, how you doing, Even Dorvell? So as a result, these people, in a sense, were getting upset. The world was getting upset. The world was seeing that America was just a big lie. Because, see, America was going around talking about it should be democracy for people under communism. It should be democracy in communist states. And here they were in the United States beating their minority, so-called minority Black population, beating them down, keeping them under, in a sense, under oppression. And this just didn't look good. And so what they had to do is that they had to, in a sense, try to find a way to make it so that it wouldn't look so public, all the stuff that they were doing to us. So they gave in and gave Black people the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this was a very interesting act. It ended segregation in public schools. It banned employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. This was a major legislative victory. Yes, it was, but at the same time, everything, as I said, every time white people give you something, they still flip the script. Yes, it in a sense ended segregation, but it also allowed for many, in a sense, other people to be able to migrate into the United States, mainly a lot of Black people from the Caribbean, the Black people from Africa. And these Black people, when they came to America, instead of them joining us, often they would serve the purposes of the masters, you see, the white supremacists. They served the white supremacists because often they used them, in a sense, as tethers. A tether is something that you hang, and a tether is something, in a sense, that you use to put between people so that you can keep one group, you can allow another group, in a sense, to be kept down, but it won't look as though you're keeping them down because they're going to have some fake examples. And that's what they used a lot of Black immigrants for. They used Black immigrants, in a sense, to come out and to make it appear, in a sense, that everything was swell, everything was going on. Because, see, after they had the bloody Sunday in Selma, when they just beat a lot of Black people, the police brutally attacked them. This led to the Civil Rights Act of 1965. This prohibited racial discrimination in voting and eliminating literacy tests and poll taxes. Yes. This meant, in a sense, that no longer you had to pay money to do it. And so what we find, in a sense, is that we saw a steady trail after 1965, in which Black people were beginning to get more and more rights. But as Black people got more and more so-called civil rights, they always had a way of flipping the script. flipping the script. When they passed the Voting Rights Act, they didn't say that you could vote forever. The Voting Rights Act had to always be renewed. See? It had to always be renewed. And so as a result, it wasn't really like they were doing anything for us because, see, they want people to vote because it does not look good around the world. It does not look good around the world for America to be trying to say that they're trying to spread democracy around the world when they don't even have, in a sense, democracy in the United States. And that's what was proven during the Civil Rights Movement, and that's what's even being proven today. Yes, today, Black people are voting for things, but they're not getting their true rights. We're not given absolute justice. There's still white supremacy. And this white supremacy is used to keep us down, but they want to make us vote. Yes, they want to make us vote. They want to make us vote so they can pretend to the world that everything is copacetic, that everything is going cool. You see? See? Yes, Black voters matter, but Black voters matter not so much because that's going to be a way for us to get our civil rights. Black voters matter because that's to make the world think that there's a democracy over here when there is no real democracy. You know, by 2013 with Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court began to weaken the Voting Rights Act. You know, they began to, in a sense, remove pre-clearance requirements. So again, a lot of states began to do little tricky ways like IDs and all that type of stuff. They began, in a sense, to kind of take, even up to today, kind of remove Black people from the voting rights, from the voting rolls. And then many Black people, in a sense, who've been to jail, sadly, yes, sadly, once you become almost like a slave and you don't have any rights. And so after you go to jail, often, in a sense, you can't vote. And so this is a way to maintain and keep a lot of Black people down. They've had voting ID laws. They purge voting rolls, kick Black people off. They gerrymander. Gerrymandering is a very common practice. And what they'll do is that in many states, it's the state legislatures that decide on various districts across the state that can have representation not only within the state but representation in Congress. And by a process of gerrymandering, and gerrymandering is when you affect the process where you limit the precincts in which Black people can vote, or you might put maybe 1 million Black people in one area that can vote, and then maybe only 100,000 whites in another area. So you can make sure, in a sense, that yes, all the Black people have just one area to vote, or maybe 2 districts, whereas white people may have 20 districts or 5 districts or 15 districts. And this is a way through gerrymandering to make sure, in a sense, that Black people can vote. And so we see, in a sense, is that yes, even though we have the Voting Rights Act, even though we had this as early as 1965, as late as 2024, they're still finding ways by voting, by ID laws and other ways to hold us back. But we have to keep fighting. Yes. We had to keep fighting. Organizations like Black Voters Matter, Fair Fight, and other Black organizations continue to fight for voting rights. Yes, we have to. We have to focus on mobilizing voters and opposing restrictive laws. Don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted. I'm not, in a sense, advocating that Black people should be so interested in trying to make sure that they participate in national elections like for the president, because that, we don't really choose the presidential candidates. As a result, I wouldn't really say that Black people should be involved in that. But Black people should really be involved. Yes, Black people should really be involved. Black people should really be involved in making sure that they're able to vote in their local elections. Yes, you have to get those representatives in Congress. You have to get those aldermen. You have to get those school boards to reflect what we want. Yes. That doesn't mean you have to vote for president. But every foundational Black American citizen should be voting in their local elections, because that's where we can have the most influence and that's where we can have the greatest impact. It is very important that we do this. You see, voting is the only way that you can make sure that you help your surroundings. Right now I've heard, They're bringing in a lot of immigrants. I've even heard that there's some laws where the Democrats are trying, in a sense, to make sure that they can give more and more money to the immigrants, take away monies that should be coming to us. That's why you have to vote. That's why you have to participate in your local elections. You have to try your best to make sure that you vote in your local elections so you can have some control. I have to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. Granted, you may be able, in a sense, to become a black mayor of a city. And we know, in a sense, that many policies that affect the city is ultimately determined by the state. And we know that there's gerrymandering where they try to maintain a method to try to keep us down. But although they try to keep us down, we have to fight. We still have to struggle. We still have to make sure, in a sense, that we're able to do things. Dorvell says you have to vote for president because he selects the Supreme Court. No, you don't have to vote. Just because he selects the Supreme Court, what does that matter? What does that matter? We know, in a sense, that just because the Supreme Court, they select the Supreme Court, that doesn't matter at all. Because see, if the Supreme Court justices aren't going to do anything for you, which they're not, and therefore, what is the problem? But if you try to make sure that your state court, your state Supreme Court, your state district courts, your city courts, if you make sure that they're, in a sense, getting the proper representation of black people who are going to fight for you, black people who are going to fight for me, black people who's going to fight for us, then therefore, in a sense, you're going to have power. So no, it doesn't matter. Ivory Guinea says, the immigrants have discovered that having rights is better than money. They want FBA out of those rights. Kind of, not really. Immigrants don't give one damn about no damn vote. Immigrants understand, in a sense, they want to get that money. That's what it's all about. Money, baby, money. When they can, in a sense, when they can get money through the federal government, I mean, they've even made some claims. I don't know if this is true or not. They made some claims, and they've shown, in a sense, they showed on TV where FEMA was using some of their monies instead of, in a sense, helping these cities when they have, after these very terrible events that take place, some of these tragedies like these hurricanes and stuff, they've been giving some of that money to the damn immigrants to buy houses, to the immigrants to be able to support them. What we have to do is we have to make sure, in a sense, that we understand that voting is only important. Yes, voting, in a sense, in the national election is important for some, in a way, but in a way that shouldn't dominate foundation of Black Americans. The most important people, in a sense, should be doing is trying to make sure that they are voting in their local elections. If you don't vote nationally, vote in your local elections. Vote for your school board. Vote for your mayor. Vote for your city councilman. Vote for your alderman. Vote locally, because that's the only way that we can have power. You see, if you truly want to see Black power, FBA power, you'll have to vote. But you'll have to make sure that in a sense, you do that. Dorvell says Supreme Court has been eroding the civil rights affirmative action. Yes. That's because the civil affirmative action never occurred. Listen, I'm 73 years old. I'm 73 years old, and let me tell you something, family. I have never, ever once met anybody that got a job off of affirmative action. The only time Foundation of Black Americans get their jobs is by having the legitimate credentials, by getting, in a sense, the legitimate paper. You do not, I repeat, you do not get jobs through affirmative action. Affirmative action only helped white women get to work. It didn't even help a lot of Black women. It mainly helped white women get jobs and Black men get put out of jobs, but that doesn't matter, because I'm going to tell you something. They have never, through the critical race theory. What is critical race theory? White people want to kill you. White people hate you. White people developed a system of racism to make sure that you will always lose. And yet, even though he's done this, we've still been able to fight in this country. Even though he's done this, we've still been able to find justice because we fight. We fight because Almighty God has always been our right hand. So no matter what you do, don't ever lose faith in Almighty God and don't ever stop fighting. Yes, the civil rights movement and the fight for voting rights continue today. But remember that our voting rights are so important for local elections. Have a great evening, family. Thanks for coming tonight. Bye.
Yeah, right now, it's time to wrap everything up, you dig? Yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed the show. Yo, and Dr. Clyde Winters, Then and now. Yeah, I really appreciate everybody, all y'all support. Y'all like, subscribe, and share this, you dig it? Yo, you've been invited to the dinner now. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed the dinner now. Yeah, Dr. Clyde Winters in the Yoshimod. Intro, outro to the dinner now. We gon' see it, so have dinner now. Yeah, raise your head, why put them down? B1 on that dinner now. FBA on that dinner now. FBB on that dinner now. It's all about unity on that dinner now. My indigenous folks on that dinner now. All my Africans rise on that dinner now. Rise up on that dinner now. And don't forget to subscribe to dinner now.
The only thing that can save you is B1, B1, B1.